I'm a college student, and obviously with all my money going towards school, pretty much any amount of extra cash helps. And because of this, mid-semester I decided to pick up a part-time job as a ramp agent at my local airport. Basically what this means is I'm the guy responsible for loading and unloading your airplane baggage. Now, every once in a while we have dead bodies transported in cargo bins, and this night was one of those occasions. On top of that, it was raining. Not just lightly raining, but pouring rain with decently close lightning. And of course, my manager assigned me to be throwing this plane. Basically all throwing means is that I was the one that had to pull all the cargo out of the storage bin of the plane. I was already tired from school earlier that day, but it was the last plane for the night, and all things considered, there wasn't too much cargo to unload. My coworker Dave pulled the ramp to the plane, and raised it up so I could walk up the conveyor belt to enter the storage bin. I climbed into the small and cramped space, and made sure to sit as far away as I could from the white cardboard box carrying the dead body. I was the only one up there, and I tried to be quick, because honestly I was just trying to go home and go to sleep. Although, there wasn't really much I could do to speed things up. The conveyor belt we use moves insanely slow, so as to give the guys on the floor time to scan each individual package. I was setting down packages for maybe 5 minutes, when I realized the lightning was not only becoming more frequent, but was also seemingly right on top of us. I had my earbuds in, and was trying to just ignore it, but that's when I heard the loudest crash that had ever filled my ears. It was lightning, but so close that I literally fell to the ground. Almost immediately, I instinctively looked up, and that's when I saw the most haunting sight I had ever seen. Down near the end of the storage bin of the plane, in the darkness, I could see the lid to the cargo bin with the dead body fly off. It was now sitting upright. The body quite literally went from laying down to an upright position so forcefully that the lid had flown off. In a full-on panic at this point, I ran as fast as I could down the ramp. All the while my coworkers were screaming at me that the plane had just been hit by lightning. We went inside, and after I caught my breath, I explained to them what I had just witnessed in the storage bin of the plane. I will never forget how quickly the color on their faces disappeared, followed by looks of pure horror. After maybe 5 minutes of discussing the situation, and hearing the fear in my voice, my manager ultimately decided it was best if I just went home. During the whole duration of my drive home, I was stuck in a state of shock. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know if what I saw was real or not. But shortly after I got home, at least part of what I saw was confirmed real, as one of my coworkers had texted me, and he explained how when he went back up into the storage bin, the lid to the cargo bin with the dead body was off, but that the dead body itself wasn't sitting up. I did some research on whether or not a lightning strike could give off enough energy to cause a dead body's muscles to tense up enough for it to physically sit up for a few seconds, but I couldn't find any results on this. So, to this day, I still have no idea whether what I saw could be explained by the lightning, a trick my mind was playing on me because of fatigue, or something else altogether. But either way, I would quit my job at the airport the very next morning. I honestly couldn't see the money as being worth it anymore at that point. The trauma I had experienced was far more than the money was worth.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Delta Airlines Flight 2998, bound for Atlanta, Georgia, with continued service to Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. All carry-on items should now be stowed securely, either in an overhead bin or under the seat in front of you.
This happened around 10 years ago, when I was around the age of 7. My family's always been one to travel a lot, and therefore, even though I was only 7, I had flown in an airplane more times than I could count. Along with this, I had also become very familiar with our local airport and its layout. This time specifically, we had shown up to our gate around 2 hours early. I remember waiting for around half that time when I had to use the bathroom. I told my parents this, and them obviously knowing I knew the layout of the airport, or at least enough to get to the bathroom, they let me go alone. And so I did. I made the 5-minute walk to the main bathrooms, which should be noted were actually the only bathrooms I knew of. It was around 3 AM at the time, and I guess that's when the bathrooms get cleaned, as they were completely roped off, which signified they were closed. I, again being 7 and not the best decision maker, proceeded to aimlessly walk around parts of the airport I was unfamiliar with to find another bathroom that I could use. And this led me to a hallway, which was sort of sectioned off from the rest of the airport. I thought I saw a bathroom sign near the end of it, and so I proceeded to walk down it. But when I was maybe halfway down the hallway, I clearly saw a head peek around a corner. It was a man. I instinctively stopped in my tracks. Hey kid, Come over here." Without even giving it a second thought, I continued walking down the hallway, now towards this man. I honestly at the time just thought it was an employee, and that he was going to direct me to a bathroom I could use. But no, the man explained how he was lost and needed me to follow him so that I could help him find the right gate for his plane. At the time, I not only trusted and believed him, but I was actually excited at the thought of helping this man. Like I said before, I was familiar with a good portion of the airport, and I guess the thought of being able to help an adult made me feel special. I responded saying I would help him, but that I wanted to let my parents know what I was doing real fast. Not even as a precaution, I was literally just excited and wanted to tell them. I told the guy I'd be right back. As I turned around and started back towards my gate, the guy began yelling at me and told me that we didn't have enough time as his plane was about to leave. But I responded, telling him I would be quick. Shortly after exiting the hallway, I looked back and saw the man practically running out of the hallway and down the stairs that ultimately led to the airport's exit. I figured that was that. I thought it was weird, but I never brought it up to my parents, and after finding a bathroom I could actually use, I practically forgot about the whole thing. Fast forward to a couple years ago, and some coworkers and I were talking about weird stuff that we experienced as kids, and that memory just suddenly came back to me. Being a lot older, it only took a second to connect the dots and realize what actually almost went down. It was a really disturbing feeling to only realize how much danger I was in years later. In retrospect, I definitely should have told my parents about it right after it happened, but I just hope the dude didn't try it on any other vulnerable kids like me.
The fall semester of my junior year of university was spent studying abroad with my best friend in Florence. We had a blast exploring the city, checking out timeless works of art, partying every night, making new friends, and traveling the country. Before we knew it, 4 months had gone by and we were on the way to the airport for our flight home. The night before saw a huge snowstorm, something that is rare for Italy. The white-covered city sparkled divinely as we drove through, and I remember feeling incredibly bummed to be going home. Even though it was 5 days before Christmas and I missed my family, I wanted nothing more than to stay in Florence forever. That feeling lasted all of 20 minutes. The airport was complete chaos, and upon entering we discovered that our flight had been cancelled. Cue the waterworks from my friend for the duration of roughly 13 hours. Yes, 7 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. We spent in line to try to get on another flight. Finally, we were given tickets for a new flight, but that flight was leaving from Rome in 3 days. Since we handed in our keys to our apartment and all of our other friends had flown home the day before, we were completely stranded. My friend was a complete wreck at this point, terrified at the idea that we might not make it back for Christmas, and was really no help in deciding what we should do. So, I decided the best course of action would be to hop on a train to Rome and spend the next couple of nights in the airport. After 7 exhausting hours on the train, we finally made it into the Rome airport and tried to find a corner to claim and bed down in for the coming 2 nights. We found a small area between a handicap ramp and the wall. The railing for the ramp created a sort of barrier, and it made a nice, seemingly safe nook for us to squeeze ourselves into. Exhausted, we pushed our luggage into the back of the nook and lay our backs against them. After making sure my friend was okay, I covered myself with my jacket and promptly fell asleep. I awoke to the feeling of a tug on my foot, and thinking that someone had accidentally kicked my shoe while passing by, I shrugged it off and snuggled deeper into my jacket. Not 3 seconds later, I hear a man whisper, "American, American." I felt the tug on my foot again. I jump to my feet and see my best friend with her jacket on and her luggage by her side standing next to a very handsome Italian man. He had salt and pepper hair and was wearing a dark suit with a champagne-colored tie. His mouth formed a dazzling smile, but his eyes weren't smiling with it. I looked at my friend quizzically, trying to figure out what was going on and why she was standing with him. Looking back at him, I noticed that he was glancing to his sides and at the guard near the exit about 40 feet from where we were standing. His behavior immediately set off alarms in my head, and I grabbed my friend's arm to pull her back away from him. He grabbed her other arm and started talking very fast, saying that he worked for the airport and the flights out of Rome were all going to be canceled shortly, that he had a car and he could drive us to Naples and we could get a flight out of there. He said that my American friend had agreed to come with him and that I should too. American, it is safe with me. I glared at my friend and told him in Italian that we were not interested in his offer and that we would wait for our flight. With my hand still firmly gripping my friend's arm, I grabbed my stuff and made a walk away from the creep. He immediately moved into my way, blocking us into the nook, his eyes with no semblance of humanity fixed onto mine as he said, American, you are coming with me. Being cornered is a strange feeling, and prior to this instance it had never happened to me before. My reaction was immediate and it felt raw, animalistic. Full of rage, or terror, or both, I lunged at this man, shoving both of my fists into his stomach. It definitely surprised him and definitely knocked the wind out of him because his knees buckled and he toppled to the floor, bringing my friend down with him. As soon as they hit the ground, my friend began screaming, and the man scrambled to get up and away from us, but not before the security guard by the door got to him. In my adrenaline-filled state, I began repeating, "He's trying to take us! He's trying to take us!" as the security guard knelt on the guy's back, keeping him there until other guards could assist him. When the man was secured, they left him off of the ground to bring him to what I assume was the detainment room of the airport. As they lifted him, he looked directly at me with his empty eyes and fake smiled and whispered, "See you soon, American." As soon as he was out of my sight, I broke down sobbing. I was so exhausted and terrified and incredibly angry at the fact that my friend had agreed to go with this man, that she had thought it was a good plan to get into a car with this person that she had never met, and that she had put us in an extremely dangerous situation. When I confronted her about it, her only excuse was that she wanted to make it home in time for Christmas. If she had gone with him, I don't think she would have ever made it home for another Christmas.
My family's pretty big on camping during the warm summer months, or at least my dad is. I'm 16 now, but when I was a lot younger, my parents split up. I live with my mom during the school semesters, and my dad during summer break. And when I'm living with my dad, we would constantly be going on different camping trips around the state, as sort of mini summer vacations. We go tent camping, and despite almost never having any phone service or any contact with the outside world, we both loved it. It always gave us a good opportunity to bond with each other, and overall have a good time. Every time we went, my dad and I would always put in the research to try and find a new spot to go. We didn't really ever like going to the same place twice, although we did make one exception to this rule. A few years back, we found this one campsite with a really nice lake and beach. It had some really hard to pronounce name. I can't remember exactly what it was. But ever since we discovered it, every year we've gone to that exact place at least once. It was beautiful, and even better yet, not very well known to the public. Though, even still, there were always a decent amount of other campers there every time we arrived. Most of them had children or teenagers, so it wasn't a wild party scene. It pretty much got its reputation as an informal family holiday spot. There was even a small building with toilets and showers installed nearby, even though it was practically in the middle of nowhere. Something I probably should have mentioned by now is that just a few days or so before my dad and I were going to go to this exact spot and spend the weekend camping, he actually adopted 2 German Shepherd dogs. I mean, it was so recent that he hadn't even come up with names for them yet. But regardless, we figured we would take them with us on our trip. They were really well trained, and the instant my dad got them, you could tell they took a liking to him right away. So it was me, my dad, and his 2 dogs. I remember this time in particular, we left later than usual. Late enough to where by the time we had actually arrived, the sun had pretty much already set. Definitely not a good time to have to build a tent. When we pulled into the site, we'd expected to arrive to other campers already set up and lighting up the forest with different campfires. But no, We were surprised to find out we were the only ones there. We had never been the only ones there. This place always had at least a few other campers. I mean, it was especially odd considering it was the middle of the summer, and the weather had been and was expected to be really nice. Needless to say, this put us on edge, but we tried to ignore it and started taking stuff out of the car to build our tent. Building that tent was difficult to say the least, only because at that point it was pitch black outside, and if you've ever tried to set up a tent in the dark, you know I'm not lying when I tell you it was hard. As we were fumbling around in the dark, we could clearly hear a car pulling up somewhere nearby. We weren't expecting to see anyone out here at this point. My dad simply said it must have just been security, and continued setting up the tent. But I don't know why a random campsite would have had security. I think what he meant was the Wildlife Trust or something, as they do occasionally come down to inspect the area. But in the pitch black darkness of the night, whoever it was must have gotten out of their car, because through a clearing in the trees we could see a figure walking around crouched low to the ground.
"Turn the flashlight off,"
my dad said in an almost panicked voice. What he said startled me, but I did what he said. Though it was clear we were too late. The figure already knew where we were, as the sound of footsteps was getting louder, making it clear the figure was approaching us. And that's when 3 flashlights turned on, and we realized it wasn't just one guy. There were 3 grown men, now only a few feet away from us. To our absolute horror, each one of them was carrying a large knife. Once my dad noticed this, he immediately got up, holding a camping mallet behind his back. The men began to practically shout at us that we couldn't camp here. My dad initially tried to be a bit low-key with the guys, and told them that it was fine and that we'd leave. But this didn't work. The men kept coming closer to us. I remember shaking. I was utterly terrified, as I'm sure anyone would be in that situation. It genuinely felt like these guys wanted to fight, and I knew for a fact my dad against 3 grown men with knives would not have ended well. But that's when I remembered the dogs. I opened the car door, and both of them instantly jumped out of the car and towards the men. And that did it. The men scattered into the forest, but not before the dogs got some good bites in. As quickly as we could, we gathered our things and got back in the car. Both of us shook up from what had just happened. I looked both of the dogs over, and they looked fine. No marks, nothing. My dad and I were trying to figure out what to do. We couldn't book a hotel, as they didn't allow dogs. So, ultimately we just decided to drive home. On our way back, my dad would call the non-emergency line for the police and report what had just happened. Disturbingly, when we gave the location, we were informed that park we went to had been closed for months now due to a murder that had taken place there. There had apparently still been an ongoing investigation resulting in it staying closed for the summer. That did explain the lack of people there, but as we entered, we saw no signs informing us of this whatsoever. We would give the best description of the 3 men that we could, but you gotta remember, it was pitch black outside, and it all happened so quick, so I don't know how accurate we were. But apparently, the woman we spoke to said they may get in contact with us in the future, as one of the descriptions we gave supposedly matched a suspect wanted in relation to the murder. Though, at least so far, we haven't gotten a call back. This occurred in 2019, on a vacation my family and I went on in the summer. Every year, we would go on a family vacation in a different location for around a week or so. And this year, we decided to go to Daytona Beach in Florida. I'm 17, and an only child, so it was only me and my parents. Well, actually, we did have some extended family coming, but due to booking our hotels late, we weren't able to stay anywhere close to each other. We did have some planned activities together, but for the most part, we were on our own as a family. It was the first day we were there, and we pretty much just napped and lounged around in our hotel room all day due to exhaustion from traveling. Once it got dark, my parents suggested we should all go down to the beach and walk around for a bit before heading to bed. Honestly, that didn't sound all that fun, but back then I was really into photography, so I figured I'd walk down with them, and while they were taking a walk, I could take some cool pictures of the ocean. This went on for maybe 30 minutes. My parents were way down the beach at this point, and being tired, I just figured I'd head back to the room by myself. And so I did. When I entered the room, I contemplated whether or not to lock the door behind me, but decided against it, as I was the only one with the room key, and if I did fall asleep before my parents came back, I didn't want to have to get up to open the door for them. I must have fallen asleep seconds after my head hit the pillow, but just to be woken up hours later by my mom saying my name in a harsh whisper. The room had 2 beds, my parents' bed closer to the door, and mine further in the room. Again, my mom's voice cut through the silence, this time sounding even more concerned than the last. So, groggily, I rolled over and asked what she wanted. As my eyes adjusted to the dim moonlight coming in through the room's curtains, I saw her turn to look at me. It was as if she looked shocked to see me in bed. Her eyes got wide, and we both glanced back to where she was previously looking, just to see a hooded figure in all black standing over their bed. I was absolutely horrified. I tried screaming, but nothing came out. My mom nudged and whispered to my dad, who at this point was still asleep. All the while, the figure just continued to stand there, until finally, my dad woke up, and everything else seemed to have happened in an instant. Suddenly, the figure booked it outside, followed not far behind by my dad. My mom was now screaming bloody murder. I tried to follow my dad, but lost him before even making it to the hotel exit. My mom would call the police, and shortly after, my dad would return having been outran by the figure. It turns out a couple other guests of that hotel had experienced something very similar that night, and even one of the workers there had reported to have seen a man testing multiple room doors to see if they were locked. What we figured must have happened is somewhere between me arriving to the room and my parents arriving, this man must have let himself in. I mean, it made sense. I left the room unlocked for my parents, and was completely out of it asleep on my bed. And I guess the figure must have hidden somewhere inside, which would explain how he wasn't noticed when my parents got back. We would of course give the police our statement, but to this day we still don't know whatever ended up happening. Needless to say, this experience caused us to be completely on edge for the rest of our vacation. This happened around 2 years ago. My friend and I, female and both 16 at the time, were vacationing in a small national park in California. It was technically my friend's family vacation, but I was close enough to her family to where they were happy to invite me. It was only over an extended weekend, so it wasn't like I was intruding on an expensive multiple-week vacation or anything. We stayed in a hotel in a somewhat touristy area on a decently busy street, and this night, being teenagers, we begged my friend's parents if we could go off alone to go play mini-golf. The other night I had been looking on the Snapchat map, and was able to see a mini-golf course nearby. I remember suggesting we should check it out, and we figured this night would be perfect. It was only about 4 blocks down from our hotel, and we insisted on walking there alone. After a bit of pleading, her parents agreed, as long as we were back before dark. When we got there, we quickly realized the course itself was in terrible condition. It looked abandoned. I mean, all the bushes were overgrown, half the holes were flooded. You get the idea. Though, in my mind, this wasn't a bad thing. Maybe this meant we wouldn't have to pay. We saw another group of teenagers playing in the distance, and considering there were a couple clubs and golf balls lying around, we just started playing. We played the first half of our game, and nothing eventful happened. But that's when we noticed a man, probably in his mid-20s or early 30s, just following us around the course. The group of teenagers that had been there had left at this point, meaning it was just me and my friend alone with this dude. After getting a better look, I realized the guy had on what looked like to be a work uniform for the place. Maybe the place wasn't abandoned. Maybe we really were supposed to pay. And both me and my friend figured he was coming to kick us off. But no, he was just lingering around close to wherever we were. Finally, the guy approached us and asked us how old we were. He said he was asking us because he needed to verify we were young enough to be eligible to play for free. And so we told him our age. Looking back, I regret doing this, but he replied simply saying,
"Oh, okay."
We thought that would get him to leave us alone, but he didn't. He kept asking us questions like where we were from, what grade we were in, who we were with, and personal stuff like that. We didn't engage much in the conversation, and kept shooting looks at each other as if to both agree the situation was getting weird. I guess he picked up on this, as finally he left us alone. We finished playing our game, and at that point it was actually starting to get really dark. As we exited the mini-golf course, I noticed something. There was a sign that read, "Closed for the summer," which made me realize the guy we had been talking to didn't work there. He couldn't have. He was impersonating an employee. And that's when my friend stopped me. On our way out, we saw the man, but now with 4 other men all sitting on a park bench near the exit. We were frozen for a couple seconds, not knowing what to do. But that's when one of the guys noticed us and pointed in our direction. All of them got up in sync and started full-on sprinting towards us. We both knew they were exactly where we needed to go to exit, and so we had no choice but to run back into the course and climb a fence to get on the sidewalk leading to our hotel. I remember saying one word, Run. And we did. We ran back into the course, climbed a fence, and continued to run the 4 blocks back to our hotel. We never looked back once, so realistically neither of us knew if the men followed us or not. But nothing else happened that night. We caught our breath in the lobby and both agreed we weren't going to tell anyone about this. Especially not my friend's parents, as we both knew they wouldn't hesitate to stop us from doing anything fun the rest of the trip. To this day, it still makes me sick to my stomach to think what those guys' intentions were that night. It was a completely normal, boring school day. I was in 7th period math, and the clock showed 2:45 p.m., which means the school day was nearly done. As it was a Friday, and spring break was just around the corner, you could feel everyone getting antsy in their seats. A lot of people had tests and whatnot, whereas my class got to have fun. We had a super laid-back teacher who loved to entertain us as much as possible. We lucked out in that sense. Me and my girlfriend Haley were messing around in the back, talking about something that occurred earlier that day. When it happened, the alarm for the lockdown went off, and the principal came over the loudspeaker. Now, for some context, typically a teacher would yell lockdown 3 times if it was a drill. We were always told if it was 4 times, it was not a drill. The reason for this was to hide the fact that we knew someone was in the building with malicious intent. 4 times we heard the word lockdown. Now, I've gotten so used to hearing it only 3 times that I paid no attention to how many times lockdown was even said. The teacher did the usual, turning off the lights, closing the door, and ushering us to the back corner of the room where we couldn't be seen from the glass on the door. Our classroom had 2 doors, one at the front and one at the back. In the midst of all the commotion, me and Haley did the one thing you should never do in a lockdown. We snuck out of the class. We were now in the hallway on the 3rd floor. Everything looked so weird. Not a single person in sight other than the 2 of us. A sort of humming noise came from the walls, indicating the school had cut all the power. I thought this was weird, as I thought it was only a drill.
Hey, why would they cut off the power if it's just a drill?
I asked. This was when we really started to question if it was actually a drill or not. But with us being stupid teenagers, we brushed it off as nothing. We continued roaming the halls when we started to hear a sound. We got really creeped out by this, as no one was supposed to be outside the class. Fearing it was a teacher, we ran into the nearest bathroom to hide. We ran into the 4th stall that was tucked into the corner and hid. We sort of just sat there, giggling, thinking we outsmarted the teacher. Maybe about 30 seconds had passed, and we started to hear the footsteps again, but this time much closer. My heart froze. We could tell it was right outside the door. At this point, we were sure we'd been caught. We kept as quiet and as still as possible, hoping not to make a sound. It was really weird though. The person outside hadn't come in yet, but they hadn't left either. If they left, we would have clearly heard their footsteps leaving, but we never heard them. Haley pointed this out to me, and that's when we started taking the situation a bit more seriously. The door opened, and someone stepped in. I was about to walk out of the stall and apologize for sneaking off when Haley stopped me. She whispered to me,
Isn't it protocol for teachers to ask if there's anyone in the bathroom?
She was right. This wasn't normal teacher behavior, and that's when the heart-dropping realization hit us. Whoever was in the bathroom with us wasn't a teacher. While contemplating what to do, the silence was broken.
I know you're in there.
My heart dropped as the person said that. The voice was younger, and it obviously wasn't a teacher. We were practically crying at this point, unable to hold it back. The guy was now directly in front of the stall door. He started pounding on the door and screaming like a madman. As this was happening though, I heard the door open again, followed by the familiar voice of my teacher, Mr. Taylor.
Hey, what the hell are you doing?
I heard a scuffle outside, and I immediately rushed to aid my teacher. Eventually we got the guy held down and the cops were called. Apparently, the man was an escapee from a mental asylum near the school, and thankfully, no one got hurt. I don't know if any of you guys remember a few years ago when a sort of killer clown craze shook America for a few months. Well, this all happened during that time. I always remembered me and my friends thought it was funny, and we'd always watch those clown caught on camera videos that were really popular at lunch. Although, our laughter turned into fear when we were made aware that a few of those clowns on Twitter threatened to come to our school at 11 a.m. that day and quote-unquote kill all of us. Luckily, the school picked up on this, and they sent out emails to the parents that they had scheduled a planned lockdown at 10:30 that day in response to the threats. I was sitting in history class when I heard the familiar sound of the lockdown alarm, followed by the teacher rushing to the windows and door, locking and closing them. Even though initially the threat freaked me out, I wasn't worried at this point. I reasoned that it was most likely just another blank threat online, and that nothing would happen. After about 40 minutes of silence, sitting on the cold floor in the corner of the room, the emergency green flashing light turned off, then followed by the air conditioning slowly falling silent, and then the hallway lights switched off. The school had cut the power, but why though? At this point, me and my classmates were staring at each other. We all knew that something real was going on, as the school never cut off the power unless something serious was happening. After 10 minutes or so, we could all hear a faint banging noise from down the corridor, shortly followed by heavy and fast footsteps. Someone was running down the hallway. They started banging on the lockers and screaming. At this point, a few girls started quietly crying. Just then, the most terrifying thing ever happened. One of the men, dressed as a clown, ran up to the class door, banging and screaming. Multiple people were crying now, and one of my friends whispered to me in complete seriousness, saying we were all gonna die. I have no shame in admitting that this caused me to start crying too. I then heard the loud sound of glass shattering. The man had shattered the glass part of the door, and I could see his arm reaching through to try to unlock the door from the inside. I was frozen and in complete disbelief as to what I was witnessing. But luckily, my teacher reacted quickly, grabbing a piece of shattered glass from the ground and stabbing the man's arm before he could unlock the door. He instantly grabbed his arm back, and you could hear his screams of pain. He then quickly stepped away from the door, and his screams slowly faded down the corridor. After another 2 hours, the principal came on the loudspeaker, explaining everything. He said that just after 11, 2 men walked into the school, one holding a kitchen knife. They ran around the school, threatening to kill students and trying to break into classrooms. But once the police raided the school, only one of them was caught, and it wasn't the one who tried to break into our classroom. After the whole event, the school got over 20 buses to take the younger kids home, and the kids 9th grade and over, like me, were told to walk home in groups and call the cops if we saw anything suspicious. I had a hard week at school after that experience. I was always thinking that the men would return, this time with a gun or something, but nothing happened. This, nonetheless, will be scarred into my mind forever. Ever since the lockdown, the school has hired a few more on-campus police officers, and they've installed some auto-locking features on doors and windows. This has made me feel a little bit better in school, but this isn't just an experience you can simply forget about. I live in the middle of nowhere. The school I go to has maybe 500 students in total. It's enough for everyone to know everyone's name. Regardless, this day our school went on lockdown. That familiar, yet eerie chime of our principal's voice saying to remain in our classes until further notice rang through the building over the intercoms. His voice was surprisingly calm, especially considering the fact that he didn't even say it was a drill. Despite our little town, crime isn't completely unheard of. We've had our fair share of reported break-ins, robberies, and even some gang activity.
I bet it's a robber down at Chase Bank,
my friend Kyle joked. I laughed, and we started talking about what we actually thought the whole lockdown was for. Kyle's voice was beginning to get louder, only interrupted by our teacher, Miss Sander herself, shushing him. It had now been about 10 minutes of complete silence, but like most high schoolers tend to, we all lost our patience. Everyone was now talking softly to whoever they were sitting next to at this point. Just then, we all heard it. Footsteps. Not just one pair, but a few walking down the hall. We all went quiet, knowing that something was wrong, and if this was a drill, it would have been just one pair of footsteps, that being the teacher checking on the classrooms. Even Kyle, who had previously been talking, grew silent. Miss Sander moved slowly to the doorway, peering out from behind a corner. The heaviness in the air was suffocating. Just then, we heard footsteps again, seemingly doing another lap around the school. A girl across the room let out a muffled sob of fear. I focused my attention on the door. I was leaning out from behind a table to peer through the window to see if I could see anything. I'm not sure what I expected to see, but whatever I was expecting, a whole lot of nothing was not it. The hallway was empty and completely dark, as it tends to be when no one was in it. The lights were all automated in my school, but just then, I noticed some of them turn on. A wave of yellow light instantly filled the room as we huddled in, casting shadows against the rows of desks. Someone somewhere tried to calm the crying girl, but I could hear their own murmured voice waver.
I was still looking through the door's window from a distance at this point. But of course, as I was doing this, I saw someone walk up to the window and start looking through into the room. I instantly ducked back down behind the table the whole class was hiding behind. I felt my heart beat wildly as I heard the sound of the doorknob start to shift. My vision grew static as I pulled my knees to my chest, curling up tightly in the corner of the room. The door shook as the guy banged on it repeatedly, and as he was doing this, my biggest fear came true. The door hinges gave out, and this guy proceeded to walk into the classroom. All of us went silent, praying this man wouldn't walk over to the corner of the room and see all of us hiding behind this table. About a minute passed of just this guy standing there, and we could hear someone else sprinting to the door, followed by the words,
"Dude, we gotta go. The cops are already here."
That's when I heard the guy start running out of the room and down the hall. The cops came, and a little later that was it. The guys who entered the school were never caught, and apparently they were armed with guns. The story goes that one of the kids at my school tweeted at a gang, essentially making fun of them the night before that school day. And of course, the gang took it very seriously and planned on raiding the school and killing the kid responsible. Luckily, they weren't successful, but this experience still terrifies me nonetheless.
6 months ago, I moved to my new home in a new city, and I'll keep it private for my privacy, and you'll see why later in the story. I met my new neighbor. The first impression of him was that he was very nice, funny, and a down-to-earth guy, but his behavior began to change after getting to know him. He's becoming a bit weird. Then I met his son. He was telling me that his father was threatening him with stupid things because he was playing in the neighborhood and he only liked for his son to play at his house. He seemed like a hovering parent that did not like his son to go anywhere or to have any type of freedom. My neighbor began to be mean to everyone that lived near us. It became very distant, as if he wanted us to probably get away from him. At least that's what I was assuming. One night, it was around 2 a.m. when I was awakened by screaming and arguing. I stayed in my bed and I covered my ears with my pillow, but my window was open because I liked the fresh air. The arguing continued, then all of a sudden it stopped. I heard grunting and something being dragged across some type of floor. I got tired of hearing the noise, so I decided to get up and close my window, which is actually facing my neighbor's house. I got up, and as I were getting ready to close my window, I looked up at my neighbor's house, and I saw something hanging through a window, so I took this video. I didn't know what this was, but the prior argument that I heard told me that that was a body hanger from the ceiling. I shut my window very quietly, and I called the cops, but I whispered while I was on the phone with them. I don't know why, and at that point I didn't want to know why that happened. The person that he was arguing with was one of his son's friend's father. They were arguing over something my neighbor said to his son's friend. The police eventually came and they arrested him. I told them not to come over here so I didn't have to make a report, so I went down to the station. My neighbor has already been through trial, and he actually received a death sentence, but I don't want to give too much information because it'll bring up who I am. So I live in a neighborhood that is considered middle class, but has its bad parts and its very good parts. I live right in between. One night, I got off of work pretty early because we didn't have that many customers coming in and out. By the way, I work in a locally owned restaurant. It was the winter time, so it would get dark outside pretty early at around 5 p.m. I drove home at around 6, went into the apartment and just relaxed like usual. At one point, I was on the phone with one of my female friends and I heard something by my room outside. We live on the first floor, by the way. I thought maybe that someone was just walking by, but the noise continued. Again, I didn't think anything of it because my room faces our front parking lot. The sound continued, but it was a little lower, as if it were further away. I got off the phone with the girl and I looked outside. I saw a woman standing by my brother's car and my car in the middle of the parking lot. I yelled for my brother not because she was simply standing there, but due to her back being bent backwards in an unnatural way and her screaming. He came to my window, opened it, and screamed out for her to move. All of a sudden, she fell on her back, got up, and ran away. After that, we looked at each other and began to laugh. Eventually, I went to sleep. I woke up to the same sounds from earlier. This time, I knew exactly what it was, so I took my phone out to record. She was in a darker area that had no lights, but this is what I caught on camera.
She was here. She was like outside in the front around my brother and my car, and she was just standing by my car, just looking at it, and she was like talking for herself. And she was there for like at least 10 minutes, and then she went to my brother's car, and she's just saying all kinds of crazy stuff and talking to herself. And right now it's like, where's my clock? It's like 4 in the morning, dude, and it's 4 a.m. You know what I'm saying? I'm hiding.
I went back inside and I waited it out with my gun. I didn't go back to sleep, and the lady ended up leaving. I don't know if she was a tweaker or possessed. My name is Matthew and I'm 16 years old, and I'll be recounting an event that happened to me and a group of friends a while ago. I live in Perth, Western Australia, and due to construction happening in the area, there are some large construction sites, which is where this story will take place. This happened during the school holidays, and it was on a night that I decided to meet up with a few friends. I won't share their names for obvious reasons. I asked my friend if he wanted to come to my house tonight. He said sure, so I waited for him outside, and I met up with him. We went into my backyard for a while and we stayed there. Having an interest in urban exploration, I asked my friend if he wanted to go around to this construction site that was nearly finished of some new house. He said, yeah, sure, let's go. I thought it was a good idea to go. This is where the story gets worse, but that's for later. So both my friend and I agreed to go to the construction site. We walked out of my gate and onto a path leading to it, which was around the corner. When we get to the front of the construction site, we were both surprised of how modern and big it was. It was a typical 2-story house with a garage, pool, and a patio. I recall walking him to the left side of the house, where a narrow path was to get to the backyard. When we got to the backyard, we were looking around and we saw the pool, a large patio, and a nice direct view of the city at nighttime. Anyways, we wanted to get inside the house. To be honest, we went in there to take photos and explore. We went to the backyard and tried a few of the doors that were there. Eventually, we found one that was surprisingly open, and we walked in. Both my friend and I were looking around. The interior of the house was large, and I remember a huge light. It was the size of a small person hanging from the roof. We decided to go upstairs. The stairs weren't placed yet, so all it was a guardrail with some timber and steel plates all ascending to the second floor. We climb up and get to the second floor. That floor is absolutely massive. To the left, you have a room that is a bathroom. Well, it was connected to a bathroom. And it had a closet and a bedroom. When you leave the bathroom, there's a hallway which leads down to the area that has an office room and a balcony. We went back to the bathroom area and we turned the light on to have a better look around the room. Me and my friend had one last look and then we left. When we got outside, we looked up and I asked my friend did he turn the light off. He said no, and I went to accompany him while he did. This is where things start to frighten me. As I'm waiting downstairs for him, all of a sudden I hear this pounding and yelling. It was someone yelling, "What are you doing?" I ran out screaming and yelling so loud that my friend heard me and he ran outside. As we got onto the road, we hear a man yelling for us to get back here. We ran around the corner and hid in someone's bushes until he went away. My friend and I decided to go for a walk. As we were walking, our other friends called us, and we told them what happened. They were eager to come check out the house too. So me and my friend, we get home and wait for the other two friends. Eventually they came, and I told them all the events that happened, and my other friends were eager to go check out this house. So in total, there were 4 of us. When we got to the house, we all decided to split in 2 groups. It was 2 of us going one way and 2 of us going the other way. Pretty much, me and my friend went inside to explore, and the other 2 stood outside keeping watch. Both my friend and I enter. We both have our flashlights on. We were walking around the whole bottom floor to make sure there's no one in there. I recall walking toward the staircase with my other friend, checking out the house. As I was walking, I stepped on a small rock and made a cracking sound. As soon as that happened, something absolutely terrifying happened, and that fueled my adrenaline. At this point, this is where I started to record a short clip of what happened.
Okay.
There were either repeated knocks or someone pressing the door handle to one of the rooms on the door downstairs repeatedly. Both my friend and I, we were out of there so fast and shocked, we were yelling and screaming. We eventually get outside and we tell our other friends what happened. They also asked what happened, and we said, as we were exploring halfway in, we heard a few knocks or a rattle on the door handle. They were just as shocked as I was. I asked who did the knocking. They asked me what I meant. They were in the front keeping watch. Still to this day, this event scares me and has somewhat taught me a lesson. And that's not to trespass.
I, a pizza guy, intercepted a kidnapping during a delivery. I deliver pizza, and I'd been having a really busy night, non-stop back and forth, without any time to even pause and take a leak. I'd been so busy that I wasn't really thinking about bathroom breaks. But we're also going through a bit of a heat wave in our area, so I've been drinking copious amounts of water. All of a sudden, as I was driving to this particular delivery, the urge to go hit me. Like, things went from 0 to 60 in an instant. Thankfully, I was close to the customer, so I could get this one over with quickly, or so I thought. I pulled up to the house, and it was an area I delivered in before, so I could immediately see that something wasn't right. All the lights were off in the house, not even the glow of a television or anything. It was extra apparent because the street light closest to the door happened to be out of order, and on top of it all, the block was dead quiet. This is a big university area, and obviously there aren't many student renters in July, but there had to be at least one person because someone ordered this pizza. Maybe they just like sitting in the dark, or they were out in the backyard. Whatever. I just didn't want to get out of my car and knock on a quiet house in the middle of the night without first checking that I had the correct address, and the customer was inside. It was scorching that night, even after sundown. My car's AC is a joke, and the piping hot pizzas don't help things much, so I have to try and open the car door as infrequently as possible to keep any cool air in. I called the number the customer provided, and the voice on the other phone said, "Yeah!" kind of brusquely and out of breath. I tried to keep it clear and concise. "Hey, it's your pizza, out front, but there doesn't appear to be anybody home." The customer replied, still gasping for air, "Yeah, I'm not home." I had to pee so badly by that point that I was much less patient than I'd otherwise be with a customer right out of the gate. "Well, then we're gonna have to terminate the order, because I've arrived in the stated delivery window, and you were supposed to pay in cash. So I don't know what to tell you. Plan ahead next time." I instantly regretted letting my bladder do the talking for me, as the voice on the other end came through more clearly, as a young, bubbly, and very distraught girl who couldn't have been older than 20 or 25. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I was running down the street so I could barely hear you," she cried. "I just switched you out of my AirPods. Is that better? Sorry. I completely lost track of time at work, but I knew you were coming. That's why I'm literally running home right now. Please don't leave. I'm starving, and I don't have a car. Seriously, please don't leave. 5 minutes tops, okay? I know what it's like to be hungry and running late, and have no car but not live near any restaurants. Plus, when I heard her voice, I began to remember more specifically having delivered to this place a couple of times before, and she always had been perfectly nice. Now I felt bad for snapping at her. I tried to walk it back, while simultaneously looking out my window for potential spots to pee. No, my bad. I'm letting the heat get to me, and it's not your fault. No need to rush. See you when you get here. I hung up, and while surveilling the street, was starting to think I was really out of luck. All the other houses had people in them, and were close together, so there were no clumps of trees or out-of-the-way patches of land or anything. Of course, I had just tossed my empty water bottle at the last delivery, because I'm an idiot. Finally, I decided it was escalating to the point of an emergency, and the safest bet was to use a bush in front of the woman's house. She wasn't home. The streetlight was out, so no one would see me. The people who were home were inside. My car was parked across the street, and we're a small shop who don't wear uniforms, so if someone did spot me, they'd have no way to connect me to my employer. Animals pee outside all the time. Humans are animals. This is fine. I scurried over to the tallish bush in her front yard. She didn't really have that much of a yard, more just a walkway lined with bushes and flowers that ran adjacent to her front door. The biggest cluster of bushes, the only one where I could be sure there would be no visible splatter on the side of her house, was about 4 feet from her door. I looked both ways, unzipped, and let fly. After the initial millisecond of relief, I noticed the sound was way off, more like pissing on something solid than something leafy. I started panicking, thinking I'd aimed wrong, but once I start, I can't stop midstream. So I keep squinting into the darkness to see if maybe I was hitting a key rock or something and could just move just a few inches over. Instead, all of a sudden, I heard a way more concerning noise. A deep voice exclaiming, "What the fuck?" And before I could turn around, assuming I'd been caught by a neighbor, a man came leaping out of the bushes. He blew by me, brushing my golden shower off him as he did. He spit pretty empathetically on the ground, so I think I might have beamed him right in the face. I didn't see where he went after a few paces, but though this next part is kind of a blur, I do think I remember hearing a car screech out from a bit further away after a minute. I'd gotten some night vision by that point, so I was able to make out his height, builds, and outfit, but only the most general details of each. I was in such shock that I didn't even put my dick away. I just stood there trying to figure out what had happened. The reality was so terrifying that my mind refused to accept it, and impulsively searched for a reasonable explanation that can make everything okay. I thought, could these bushes lead to some backyard area and just look like they were against the house? Could they have been obscuring an open window? My inner voice was desperately screaming, "Bruh, that man was wearing a hoodie in 90-degree weather. That was a bad man. You're in a bad situation." But the very idea that I was within inches of a guy who would be hiding in bushes at all, let alone in front of a young woman's house at night, just wasn't something I was ready to grapple with yet. I was coping by not coping. My fight or flight response totally failed me at that point, because my dumbass did the absolute last thing I should have done, and approached the bushes to try and validate this. There must have been a good reason for a man in a hoodie to be behind these bushes in the middle of the night theory. So I walked over to the side, turned on my phone flashlight, and tried to peer around the line of shrubbery. Pro tip, as scary as things may look in the dark, seeing them with a single beam of your flashlight can sometimes make it even worse. That's when I saw the bag. There was a tattered drawstring bag sitting behind the bushes, slightly splashed with pee. But I was in such a moronic daze from shock that I groped around for it thinking, see, this is it. This will explain why he was back here. It explained it. Once I maneuvered it over and pulled it open, I saw a sharp knife, a roll of duct tape, and a bottle of pills. The delusions officially broke at that point, and all the adrenaline, endorphins, and self-preservation instincts that had been suppressed kicked in 10 times over. I became whatever the opposite of dazed is, more laser-focused than I've ever been in my life. with one single goal: get back to my car. I dropped the bag, booked it across the street, got in my car, and slammed the pedal to the floor before the door was even all the way closed. I went as far as I could, as fast as I could, until I hit a red signal. Then I pulled off to the side and realized I shouldn't be driving anymore. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour drugstore and took a breath. I was finally calm and coherent enough to zip up and formulate a plan of action. My first lucid thought was, who do I call first? The police? Or the girl whose house that was? I thought about it for what couldn't have been really more than 10 seconds, but felt like an hour, and decided, okay, I'm in my locked car with the engine running. If trouble starts, I can drive away. I know something's up. She might not. She needs to know not to keep walking in that direction. But as I was dialing her number, it occurred to me, what if there was no girl? I thought I remembered delivering to that house before. But what if I was wrong? What if the girl on the phone was just a decoy to get me there to rob me? Or worse, every pizza guy on the planet has seen the Evil Genius documentary by now. So I thought, she called me all out of breath, she wasn't home, this whole thing was off. Can't risk it. I'll start with the cops. I called 911. The operator was very helpful in keeping me calm, because I was a complete wreck by this point. He kept assuring me that someone would be there soon. I kept telling them they had to get there before the girl did, but I was trying to express 3 thoughts at once, and really damaging my own credibility. It came out more as, you've got to save the girl because he wasn't after me. I was just delivering a pizza. Unless they were after me, in which case there might not be a girl. But I talked to one on the phone, so then you should find the girl because they used her to lure me there. But if she's real, she doesn't know about the guy who was also real. And there could be more guys if there's actually a girl. And you know what? Even if there isn't a girl, there might actually be more guys. I only checked one part of the bushes, so I don't actually know. But we'll know which guy's the one I saw because I pissed all over him, you know. I didn't mean to. This was back when I thought the girl was real, but not home. But she might be real, so you really need to find her if she is, because the guy was real. Finally, they basically just asked me to stop talking and stay on the line. But that was when I saw an incoming call from the customer. I couldn't answer it without disrupting my 911 call, so I just ignored it. But then she sent me this text like, hey, I'm here. Don't see you. I told 911 she was there, and they said officers were only minutes away. But who knows how long that actually meant, especially after I'd given such a scattered account of the events in my panic. I just felt overwhelmed with guilt, because my rational mind said the odds of her being a decoy girl for some large scam targeting pizza guys were low, and the odds of her being the intended victim of a predator were high. So I put my 911 call on mute and turned back, heart absolutely pounding out of my chest, compulsively muttering, fuck, 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 the entire way. Then I took 911 off mute and told them I'd return to look for the girl. They weren't happy about that, but I saw her meandering past the parked cars in the street, looking to see if one was mine, and I waved her down, flashing my brights. She bounced over to the window of my car, happy-go-lucky. I figured that was a good sign and she wasn't in on whatever this was. But I was just so scared to be back in the general area and to not know what had just happened, or what was going to happen. I kept whispering, get in, get in, get in. And she was like, get in? Huh? Oh, you want me to get the pizzas from the back? I didn't want to make the same mistake with her that I'd made with 911. So instead of trying to tell the whole story, I stuck to the bare basic facts. There was a man in your bushes. I'm on the phone with the police. I don't know where he is right now. Please get in the car so we can lock the doors. I was barely able to get even those sentences out, and I was shaking like I'd had 10 cups of black coffee. I held up my phone with 911 on the call screen to verify it for her. I thought that this was why she got in the car with no further explanation, but it turns out that wasn't entirely it. You still there? Is she with you? Are you safe? Is anyone else there? 911 kept checking in, not knowing who the third party I was talking to was. I reassured them and we drove, more cautiously this time, to a location 911 instructed us to wait at, to speak with police after they cleared the area. I didn't actually have to do much after that. The police came pretty soon after. A police car met us. I gave a statement telling them everything I observed, and she went to go speak to more officers in more detail than they needed me for. It turns out the reason she got into the strange pizza guy's car without probing any deeper into my story is because she knew who the man was right away from my description. She had an abusive ex-boyfriend who was apparently psychotic enough that he immediately came to mind from hearing, "There's a guy in your bushes." She later called us to thank me and insist on leaving a huge tip. I wasn't there when the call came in, so the kid who answered didn't know to refuse to accept the money. But the manager already promised the next time we see her, we can load her up with enough 1 free pie cards to last a lifetime. I, a pizza guy, intercepted a kidnapping during a delivery. I deliver pizza, and I'd been having a really busy night, non-stop back and forth, without any time to even pause and take a leak. But I'm still not the same since. Even though I know he didn't even have anything to do with me directly, this truly shook me to my core. So, man in the bushes, let's not meet.
This happened 2 years ago, when I was working for a very large carpet cleaning company. It's exactly what you'd expect. I'd spend the whole workday going from house to house, completely deep cleaning the residents' carpets with a lot of different tools and machinery. I was 22 and a female. I'm actually pretty sure I was one of the only females working for this company. But at the same time, I really enjoyed it. And if I'm being honest, I was actually really good at the job. So, because of this, I was given a lot of work, and would usually hit between 6 to 8 houses daily, driving all across multiple towns. This night, I was working late, as one of the houses I cleaned earlier in the day took way longer than expected, which of course sent me back the rest of the day. I'd say it was around 7 p.m. when I had one house left to do for the day. Though, upon arrival at the given address, I quickly realized it was in the middle of nowhere. And after knocking on the front door, I also realized no one was home. I was annoyed, yeah, but realistically I was the one that was late for the appointment. I decided to wait until someone came home, as I knew I'd get chewed out by my boss if I left without cleaning anything. And luckily, 10 minutes later, the resident pulled up next to my van. He was a middle-aged man, balding, wearing dirty shorts and a jacket. He honestly seemed a bit awkward, but was apologetic and let me into his house with all my needed equipment. Upon entering, I instantly realized the carpet and just the house in general was already unbelievably clean. I mean, it even smelled like cleaning supplies had just been used. To be honest, it was a little weird. I wasn't used to seeing already clean carpets upon arrival. I was genuinely questioning whether me cleaning them would even make a difference. But regardless, I followed protocol and pulled out my company laptop to calculate how much it was going to cost before starting.
Hey, do they keep track of where you are on that thing?
His question caught me off guard. That was an immediate red flag. After the initial shock from the question, I replied saying that it did, and that my boss knew exactly how long each job should take. In reality, this was a complete lie. The laptop was literally just used to run a program that can calculate how much to charge a customer based on the inputted amount of work. But I felt like I had to lie, as there was definitely something off about this guy. Regardless, I started cleaning. I just figured the quicker I could clean these carpets, and the quicker I could get out of here and call it a day. Fast forward around an hour later, and I was finished. I hastily met up with the guy to explain I was done, and how much he owed me. But before I could, he interrupted me. He asked me if I could also clean his basement carpets, as he forgot to list them when he ordered the service. My heart literally dropped. I just wanted to be done with this and get out of here. But my stupid customer service conditioned brain couldn't figure out how to get away with saying no. The guy led me to his basement door, opened it, and gave me a hand signal as if to gesture that I was to go down first. I hesitated, but ultimately I did. Once I got to the bottom, I was horrified. The basement looked horrible compared to the rest of the house. Not only was it unfinished with no carpet whatsoever, but there were clearly 7 deep freezers lining the walls. In the middle of the room was a lit, low-hanging ceiling light revealing an old television set, VHS tapes scattered all over the floor, and an old recliner facing the TV. Behind the set were 2 white shelves full of VHS tapes. The whole while I'm looking at the basement, the guy stood at the top of the steps blocking the doorway with a disturbing smile on his face. I looked up at him and said,
Yeah man, let me go get my stuff.
With absolutely no intention of cleaning anything, I just wanted to get out of there. I held my breath and began to walk back up the stairs. The whole while, all I could hear was my own heartbeat in my ears. But as I got to about the 3rd stair from the top, the guy was still blocking the door, with still that disturbing smile on his face. I stood there for maybe 20 seconds, just looking at the guy, waiting for him to get out of the way, when I swear I could hear footsteps in the basement behind me. Out of pure instinct and adrenaline, without even looking back, I charged towards the guy in front of me. Luckily, I was able to break past him, and right as I did, I beelined it out of the front door and into my van parked outside. I was leaving thousands of dollars of cleaning equipment behind. But honestly, in that moment, I didn't care. I legitimately felt like my life was in danger. As I was pulling away, I glanced back at the house one last time, and I saw the same man looking out one of the windows, now with no smile on his face, but rather a cold, hard stare. I thought I could see another person, but I honestly don't know. The whole memory is sort of just a blur. The truth of the matter is that my boss would not have noticed I was missing for at least 24 hours when I didn't show up for my shift the next day. The next morning, I would call my boss, tell him everything, and ultimately quit that very day. As far as I know, they got the police involved, but I tried to distance myself from the whole situation, so I really don't know what ended up happening. I suffered PTSD over this experience. That day still haunts me. And to this day, I can't explain what I found in that basement, or the sounds of footsteps I thought to have heard behind me. But one thing's for certain. I believe that man, and whoever else was there, had planned to kill me that night for some sick reason or another.
I've always really liked chat rooms. I think they're a really great place to be able to meet new people and be social online. Since I've always been a pretty introverted person, chat rooms have helped me meet some of my closest friends, where I wouldn't have to deal with the awkwardness of actually going out and talking to new people. So, when I discovered Discord, I thought it would be the perfect place to make more friends and just overall meet new people. I joined a few random Discord servers from this website that featured random Discord server lists. I would spend hours upon hours scouring the 20-something servers I joined. I was pretty active, and even met a few cool people along the way. But this is where things got really disturbing. One night, I was on Discord as usual, sending memes and gifs to this guy I met. I can't remember his username, but what I do remember is a random invite popping up in the corner of my screen. It said I'd been invited to a server with a name I couldn't pronounce. It wasn't in English, or even any language I could recognize for that matter. It was a little strange. The picture icon was some sort of cartoon character I had never heard of, nor seen before. It was a face, deep purple in color with these frightening, realistic crimson red eyes. It was a little unsettling if I'm being honest, though I was drawn in at this point. I hovered my mouse over the accept button and eventually clicked it. The page loaded straight away, and I was in the server. The thing that struck me immediately was that there was only one Discord room on the whole server. I clicked into it, and as soon as I did, I was instantly spammed with mentions. One of the messages simply added my username, but the one under it really caught my attention. It said that in order to be able to properly accept me into the circle, they would need the following, and the message proceeded to list out some very disturbing items, one even including a jar of actual blood. It said to leave all the items outside my front door and they'll be collected. The next message told me to have the offerings prepared by midnight tomorrow. They literally used the word offerings. At this point, I was a little more than disturbed and didn't respond to the messages. Though, at the same time, I felt it was more than likely just some sort of prank, so I left the server, logged off, and didn't think about it for the rest of the night. A few weeks had passed without incident. That was until I got home from work late one night to notice my front door was unlocked. Though, I reasoned I just forgot to lock it as I was in a rush earlier in the morning. I quickly forgot about it and got on my computer like every other night browsing the web. But this time, when I turned on my computer, I noticed I had a Discord message. It was a private message from one of those people from that disturbing Discord server I left weeks ago.
I have no idea how this message was even sent, as I had private messaging set to only accept messages from people on my friends list, and this guy obviously wasn't listed as one of my friends. I noticed there were actually 2 messages. The first stated I had failed to present my offering, and the second literally threatened my life. My heart started racing. "This isn't funny anymore. Please leave me alone," I messaged back. But right after I hit send, I regretted it. I should have just ignored it like last time. In a panic, I unplugged my computer and tried to slow my rapid heartbeat. I realized how shallow my breathing was and how tight my chest felt. A few minutes passed, and I thought it would be best to just go to sleep and get my mind off of whatever just happened. But I laid in bed for hours. I couldn't sleep. It was close to 4 a.m. at this point. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the face of that cartoon icon. Again, I began to think it was just a prank somebody was pulling. But how these people found my account to invite me to the server in the first place still didn't make any sense, or even how they messaged me when they weren't on my friends list. I was again questioning if whoever these people were had actually shown up to my house to check for the so-called offerings, and if so, how they would have gotten my address. Though, all these thoughts were instantly drowned out by the heart-dropping sound of rustling coming from my closet. This wasn't the sound of something that could be easily explained, as it was a continuous rustling sound. I was literally frozen in my bed. But once I had actually grasped the severity of the situation, I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and full-on sprinted out of my room and outside. I would have ran to my neighbor's house, though my neighborhood is so spread out that the nearest neighbor was over a half-mile away, with nothing but forest in between. All I could do was stand outside on the street, looking up at my bedroom window as I frantically dialed 911. It took about 10 minutes for 2 officers to pull up. I told them about what exactly had happened, and I went inside with them as they searched the house. One of the officers went downstairs, while I followed the other upstairs. We checked the closet, but nothing. Just then, we heard shouting from downstairs followed by a gunshot and shrieks of pain. The officer next to me charged downstairs in response to find a dirty-looking man, maybe mid-30s, laying on the ground with a gunshot wound in his leg. This guy had a gun, and that resulted in the other officer shooting him in the leg. They instantly put him in custody and called for an ambulance. I was highly shook up after that encounter. This guy must have somehow unlocked my door and hidden in my house all day. First in my closet, and then when I ran out of the house, assuming I'd called the cops, he attempted to hide in my basement. Now, whether this guy had anything to do with that Discord server, I still don't know to this day. But getting a death threat message the same day someone broke into my house with a gun and hid in my closet can't be a coincidence. Either way, I'm never using Discord again.